Makes a wonderful difference. Events like this are very, very important, and it's hard to tell what's more important, the particular things that are said on stage, or just bringing everybody to talk about what has just been said on stage. And I think it's really that kind of coming together and people seeing each other and understanding that they can contact each other later. The biggest thing in starting a company is the depth of your networks of talking to people. So these kinds of things are just terrific.
Yeah, it's a great reminder too that entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon. I mean, how many things in our world today just remove barriers and boundaries so rapidly? I mean, everybody agrees that the way forward for civilization, for the planet, is going to be through the methods of entrepreneurship and innovation. And it doesn't matter what religion, it doesn't matter what government style, politics there is. It just reminds me that it's a great uniter, and it knows no boundaries. So doing something like this is very worthwhile. But I don't know if it's Western values. I think they draw upon what it means to be a good human being, period, no matter what your background is. I mean, I see it a little more along the lines that positive change is going to be necessary for the planet to survive. And the best way to create change is to be entrepreneurial, to be innovative, creative, imaginative, all the words, to be leaders, to be principled leaders. And so gatherings together like this, where people share those interests, can only be a good thing.
That's right. I think that it's important to understand that entrepreneurship is a value in and of itself,
yes,
and
good.
Innovation is a value in and of itself too. So we're communicating values already whenever we have this conversation. It's accepted very much in the Western world that this is a path forward to innovate not only products, but also social innovations. And it's well accepted. It's interesting, that's not a very old concept. This is maybe 30 years old. Maybe 30 years ago, entrepreneurs were kind of on the outside and on the periphery, and knocking the door and getting in. But it's become, through events like this, through the success of Silicon Valley, through the education programs at Stanford and Santa Clara, they've become their own ideas, which can generate both positive social change as well as positive commercial change.
And why I'm hopeful for the future is, you may be surprised to know that in the United Arab Emirates now, there are 2 required courses of every single undergraduate in the country. 2 required courses, Islamic studies and entrepreneurship. So, it is once again this wonderful catalyst, this wonderful tool to celebrate what's great about being on this planet together. All 7 billion of us heading toward 10 billion, and how we're going to have really great standard of living for many more people than today.
Right.
Well, we have a lot of colleagues in Europe,
right,
and the good news is that there's a lot more than there were 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, there's probably, we could count them on our hand, the teachers of entrepreneurship. But now there is a large number across many of the colleges in Europe. Also, thanks to this, here we are filming with you, thanks to digital technologies, there's a lot of ways to learn about entrepreneurship just online. It's not necessary to be in person. So this is great, because that means that many more, just the sheer volume, just many more students are learning about the topic. And now we'll see what the result of that is. They'll either be better employees or better participants in society, whatever they end up doing, or they'll be better equipped to be a successful founder.
And I think because of that, that's why we sometimes try to communicate that entrepreneurship needs to be viewed contextually. That is, entrepreneurship is different in different places. And when we teach, we need to be aware of that. And let me make this point, that Entrepreneurship here in Silicon Valley did not start because there were good education programs. Entrepreneurship here started kind of natively to solve problems of distance from Silicon Valley, from the rest of the United States, and entrepreneurship blossomed. Now that we understand it, and people at Stanford in particular started studying it, we understand it and can now communicate. But we're communicating an ecosystem that's here. An ecosystem may be different in Spain, it may be different in Japan, it may be different in China. So it needs to be, education always needs to be interactive. We need to be looking at the local conditions, adjusting our education, using education to help the local conditions develop, but then have that informed. So it's very interactive, very contextual. And as long as we're careful as educators, as Tom and his colleagues are, to adjust to modern times, you'll guarantee you'll capture that interactivity, which is so important. Entrepreneurship is not the same everywhere in the world, and so it can't be taught the same.
That's a long conversation, and I do not know. And so usually when there's it's certainly there'll be some disruption. How long that'll take to go completely to a model where there's no physical interaction, I would think will be at least a generation, if not two, because there's and because there's got to be something that will replace the touch.
That's right, absolutely.
And
right.
haptics
That's
is coming
exactly
along.
right. No,
I mean,
that's
it's got maybe
exactly
50, 100 years from now, haptics will be there, but there is something about looking a student in the eye right here like you and I are doing versus looking that student in the eye. Because I do a lot of classes online, but there's that special atmosphere when we're in the classroom doing our activities and our experiences.
Yeah, you cannot take the online experience, put your arm around his shoulder, say, let's go have lunch or a beer. And so much insight and so much education happens at those kind of non-formal places where you're just talking, you're just having lunch, you're just having this on-frank party. And that's why you bring people together physically. It's going to take a long time before computers replace that. And thus, it's going to take a long time until we solve the problems. How much does it cost to educate people?
Yeah,
Stanford is not the cheapest place to go to school. Santa Clara isn't either. In fact, I think we're a little more expensive than Stanford right now. And that's a real problem here.
Those business models are under disruption, and so that's probably going to happen faster than the pure digital education. Although I'm a great believer in embracing new technologies, and so our classrooms are a lot different than 20 years ago. We can augment it with technology, but to go purely, 100% digital, I think that's a ways away because of that lack of connection, that last little piece of connection.
Humans are still relevant.
At least when you're teaching leadership and sort of the humanities, things like that.
Well, as we were saying before, I think a key entrepreneurial skill is kindness and empathy and understanding of other people, and that's really difficult to do in a purely digital environment.
And building trust among a whole lot of people that you're asking to go climb that hill, climb that mountain, when there's a good deal of risk involved.
Yeah.
Thank you.